Hello and welcome to Culture of Caring. I'm your host, Natalie Boyle, and today we're going to talk a little bit about innovation. And innovation is something that I am so passionate about. And it's because I really think that growth and change, it happens because we're constantly looking for how can we do things better? How can we innovate? And so I wanted to read out, as I do sometimes, one of the Mommies In Need values, which is, for innovation, we say, we nurture big ideas and creative, fearless people. We celebrate productive failure as an important part of the process of creating and implementing something new. We recognize that the needs of our clients and community are ever-changing, and we are willing to adapt and evolve to meet those needs. So I just realized this is upside down again. That's one of my ones that I do, but that's okay. So what does that mean, really? And the first thing I'd like to talk about is something that we really discussed when we had Laura Newell on, who is our Chief of Operations and essentially our HR department. She's a one-woman HR department right now. But when talking about nurturing big ideas and fearless, creative people, I think one of the things that we do, and we do really well, I would say, is that we encourage people to, number one, be who they are, but number two, that if they make a mistake, that is not something that's punished. That's something that we really say, hey, how do we learn from this? And so when we talk about productive failure, right, it's not just saying, okay, well, something was awful, and so now you're fired. That's how some companies look at it, or giving a place where employees feel belittled or anything like that. And instead saying, okay, that was a mistake. And we all make mistakes. And in fact, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. And so really creating this psychological safety for people so that they have the chance to share those brilliant ideas. And it takes some getting used to, I'll be honest. We talk sometimes that it may take, 6 months of somebody working with us to really understand the Mommies In Need culture and that we mean what we say. When we say talk about your mistakes, when we do failed so hards at the top of every meeting, it takes a little while to get used to it. But it's something that I really believe only can make a company stronger. And then talking about this productive failure, if you're gonna do something new, which today I'm gonna talk a little bit about how Mommies In Need came to be, and which, obviously if you wanna hear my personal story and that journey, listen to our first episode. So at Mommies In Need, we have this joke that we don't have a growth curve. We have a line that goes straight up. And it really is true. If you think about, our operating budget in 2018 was $180,000. And this year, in 2022, it's $1.6 million. And we are fully expecting that next year, that's gonna go well over $2 million. And that's some pretty intense growth. And with that growth has come a lot of growing pains and a lot of learning and a lot of just figuring out, okay, how do we do this? How do we create something that's brand new? And so it is that piece of constantly innovating. And I think you can't be innovating if you're not listening to your stakeholders, all of them. So it's the clients, it's our employees. We want to make sure that everybody has that chance to say, like, hey, why do you guys do it this way? And sometimes the answer is, well, that was the only way we could figure out how to do it. And we've been able to grow because we're listening to what we're being told. So, when we started off, we were, as I've talked about before, we were running this out of my house, and we had a volunteer board that was made up just of people I knew that I was like, please, can you do this? And, shout out to the original board, because man, did we figure some stuff out together. But we had no employees other than our nannies. And as we grew and started taking on so many different people, it's one of the reasons that I feel like diversity is so vital for companies. And right now DEI and diversity is a buzzword, but when you really think about how do you grow, how do you change, how do you learn? And one of the answers there is to get as many voices at the table as you can get, right? So every kind of diversity that you add to your pool of knowledge is going to be what really helps you to figure out, okay, well, what do we need right now? Not only what do we need right now, but where are things going? How can we be at the forefront? How can we be that innovator that is making new things? And one of those pieces is making sure you have the right voices in the room, right? You have enough people with different backgrounds and different life experiences that can help you figure out where you are and where you need to go. So, our in-home program certainly went through a lot of ups and downs and a lot of failed so hards and a lot of growth. And it was always something that was so wonderful and helped so many families on such a deep level. But when we talk about innovation, we got to a place with our in-home program where, number one, the scalability is just really hard when you are serving that deep, right? Every family we serve with in-home is getting 40 hours a week of free childcare with a one-on-one nanny. And that's really expensive. But not only that, but that's not what everybody needs. There are different things that different groups need. And, whether it be because somebody doesn't need to go to the hospital every single day, or if it's because, for the really hard reasons, like they don't have stable housing, so we can't send a nanny into a place that we're not sure where they're going to be from day to day. And so we started thinking about, well, what do we do to serve that other population? How do we serve more people? And how do we do it for those people that really need us the most, but maybe for in-home care isn't the right choice for them? And so that is when we started talking to Parkland Hospital and to the Chief Innovations Officer there, Dr. Kavita Bhavan, and she really got it. At first, when we brought to her the idea of what would it look like to put a child care center in a hospital, and immediately she was on board. And she leads their innovation department, right? And the piece that we started to recognize was there really was this need, and there was this huge need within the community where people were having to make impossible choices about where to leave their kids and in order to get their medical treatment. And so we started going, okay, well, let's figure out how to do this. And in figuring out how to do something completely new like that, you also have to really just get into kind of the liminal space of not being sure exactly what you're doing and building that plane as you fly it. And that's what we've done, right? We have always kind of gone, all right, let's make the leap. Let's do the thing we need to do and have all the right people in place so that we know that, yes, things maybe have ups and downs, but we're taking that leap of faith that it's time to try. And so that's been really important to us. And as we started working, we discovered, Parkland and UT Southwestern did some research, and they found out that no hospital in the country has provided a child care center for patients. And how is that possible? How is it possible that nobody ever thought to do that? And I think it really came from the very grassroots place of I went through it, I lived it, and I recognized that there were no helps out there for parents who get sick. And so as we started just kind of figuring out how do we do this, we more and more realized that not only was it a reality, was it something that we could do, it was something that we were going to plan to do as a pilot. So from the very beginning, as we built Annie's Place at Parkland, we built it with replication in mind, with scalability in mind, with saying we think that this is going to go so well that we want to be prepared to spread it as we go. Now, we were in the middle of construction. We were deep into the project. We were planning to open Annie's Place, and it was 2020. So when the week that the world shut down, which I don't remember the date, but I do remember that it was our spring break week. So my kids were out on spring break. And then the school said, well, we're just going to not come back from spring break for like 2 weeks. And obviously that is not what happened. It's been like 2 years. But as we got that news, I had to make a really hard decision. And that decision was that we were going to have to pause our in-home service. And as much as it broke my heart, I just couldn't have us being the ones that brought something into the home of a cancer patient's family, right? Most of our families are immunocompromised, and it was just too big a risk to be sending a nanny into their homes. And gosh, that broke my heart. It was really hard. But I knew it was the right thing to do for both our employees and for our families. And I immediately started going, okay, well, I have these fabulous employees and I have got to keep them because they're amazing. So what do we do? How do we both keep our employees and serve our families? And when we have a model that literally cannot be done when you're in a pandemic shutdown. And so we just started kind of thinking, and within a matter of a couple days, really, we came up with a virtual program. And so we started teaching our nannies about how to be on Zoom. We created some curriculum and we started just advertising and saying, hey, we can't be in your homes right now in person. But if you're sick and you need help with the kids, what we can do is we can do one-on-one Zoom sessions with a nanny, and that will at least give you a chance. Obviously, the parents have to be in the building with the kids, in the house, but could they lay on the couch and take a nap for an hour? Could they finally get, whatever physical therapy their doctor had told them to be in done? And we started to discover that people loved this. And now this was really at the height of the shutdown when people were not leaving their homes. And we started going into their homes to serve the families. We would send them boxes of supplies, and then the nannies would have the same books at their house that the kids had at their house and say, okay, let's open it up and read ears, nose, and toes together. And it created that instant bond where, because the nannies had the same items, had the same books, that they were able to really create these instant connections with kids. And we weren't sure, and there was definitely some figuring out of how do we make this program work. But during the pandemic, we went national. We realized that by providing virtual services, we could serve anywhere. And so we started doing that. And at one point, we were serving families in 11 different states at one point. With the virtual program, we wound up providing a total of about 862 hours of one-on-one Zoom sessions with one of our Mommies In Need nannies. And so that was just kind of this huge piece of being able to keep service, and a huge innovation, right? It was that, the word that everybody uses too much, which is pivot. But that's what we did. We pretty much overnight were like, okay, we're going to figure something else out and we're going to serve our families. And then that construction I was talking about for Annie's Place was ready in November of 2020. And we opened a childcare center in November of 2020. And Catherine, our Chief of Childcare Operations, she likes to tell the story about how when she first called licensing and said, hey, we're ready to open our childcare center and we want to set up an inspection. And the childcare center was like, the licensing board was like, wait, you're opening a childcare center? Because all they had been doing was just shutting them down, because that is what was going on at that time. But we decided that we could control those variables in our center. So everybody wore scrubs and masks, and we kept the children very socially distant. We had very low enrollment. But the families that used us during that time were families that really needed the care. And one of the stories that I share a lot is of a mom who had some really bad health conditions and was trying to manage them. And we were in the middle of COVID, so the hospital was not allowing children in the building at all. And she had to get a shot, and it was really important. And so she went into the hospital, but she didn't have a place for her 6-year-old son. So she had to leave him in the car in the Parkland parking lot. And that is really heartbreaking. And having met and gotten to know her, it was not a choice that she wanted to make, but it was the only choice for them at that point. Well, unfortunately, when she got in, they did a blood test and discovered she was critically low on hemoglobin and that she needed an emergency blood transfusion. And so they wheeled her back to do that. And she had to tell one of the nurses that they had to go out to the car and find her son and then convince him to open the door when she had made him promise that he wouldn't open the door for anyone but her. And the whole situation was incredibly traumatic for the family. And not only that, but because it was an unsafe situation, it wound up, having to go to CPS as a case. But the happy story about this is that not only did we get a hold of this family, let them know about Annie's Place and that they could have this free childcare, but we were also able to have our social worker work with the social worker for CPS and close out that case, because she would never have to leave her son in an unsafe environment again, because we were always going to be there, and we would be there to help so that she could do whatever she needed medically, and know that her kid was in safe and loving hands. And not only that, but this leads to another one of our innovations, which is our play therapy program. So I, having had my kids and them be very young as I went through all of my health challenges, I did wind up putting my kids in play therapy as they got a little older, because they were showing signs of that stress. And particularly, my health has always been complicated. It always will be complicated. So anytime around any of my hospital stays or one of my surgeries that I had to have, I really saw them having some issues and some regression, and really acting out, and because they didn't know how to process their little feelings, their big feelings in their little bodies. And so we went to a play therapist who made a huge impact on my kids. And so as we started talking about opening Annie's Place, I said, we need to have a play therapist available for our kiddos. And so we presented it, and we were awarded a Crystal Charity Ball grant. And that allowed us to open a play therapy program. So we have on staff a full-time play therapist who is there not only to do one-on-one sessions with the kiddos that are going through these really difficult situations at home, but also is able to do crisis interventions and classroom interventions for the kids that come to Annie's Place. Over 70% of the kids that we serve they've never been to any form of childcare before that wasn't with a relative. And so it's really hard for these kiddos to separate from mom. It is first day of school every day, because every day we have new kids. They're coming in and out all day. And so we have to be more than just a traditional childcare center. We have every staff member trained by our play therapist. We learn about trauma-informed care. And so we have that extra support for kids that are there. And that's something that I'm really proud of, and I think is a really fantastic innovation of looking at what do our clients need and what are we able to continue to provide for them. So Annie's Place, right? We opened, we started serving in November of 2020. And the success of Annie's Place has been really astounding. November 2020, we served very, very few families, and really the first part of 2021 until we were able to get people vaccinated, it was much harder. And so even with that slow ramp up, we now have provided more than 16,000 hours of free childcare to families that were going to medical appointments. We've provided it for more than 5,000 medical appointments for more than 500 children. That's a lot of fives. That's a fun one. But it really has been this tremendous growth. And again, that's because we were constantly trying to see what we could do better, how we could outreach to the families. And now we are in a spot where we have yet again innovated, and we started, when we first formed, our mission was really around helping stay-at-home moms going through a health crisis. Well, then we broadened that and said, of course it's moms and dads and grandparents and any caregiver going through a health crisis. And then as I've talked about before, when we opened in November 2020, the NICU at Parkland called us and said, could you please watch the kids of the NICU babies? Because we don't have, we've dropped our parent visitation rates because they don't have a place for their other kids. And we said, well, of course, we're here on site. Of course, that makes sense, and we'll do that. And the other piece that we started doing, because it was 2020, was offering backup childcare for our first responders, for those hospital staff people that were picking up extra shifts and were so short-staffed and were exhausted. We said, come and use our childcare center so that you can take care of your health, you can be there for our patients. And we recognize that that's a part of healthcare access, is that if we don't have providers providing that providing that healthcare, then the patients can't get the treatment that they need either. So that's when we really kind of revamped, and we came up with our new mission, which is caring for kids so families can access healthcare. So it's a much broader mission, but it really is about anywhere where childcare and healthcare meet. That is where we are. We also started taking preventative care appointments, because at Annie's Place, we were starting to see women coming in at 7 and 8 months pregnant with no prenatal care, which obviously increases their risk for all kinds of things. And it was because they had other children and they found it really hard to get to their medical appointments with their other children in tow, or they weren't allowed to bring them in because it was COVID. And so as we sort of grew and made this more expansive mission, it started to lead us to think about, okay, well, how do we do more? How do we do more for those first responders? How do we support even more? And we started to lead a collaboration effort, and we got on board UT Southwestern, Children's Medical, Children's Health, and Parkland Health and Hospital System. And with those three together, we went from having Annie's Place open 5 days a week to having it open 7 days a week. And the Saturday and Sunday spots were this three-way collaboration between the hospitals to provide free childcare all day for their hospital staff. And so we were able to figure out how to work, first of all, how to work collaboratively with 3 different hospitals, which was no small challenge, and get a legal document drawn up with 4 different parties. And remember, we're very small. So that was fun and exciting, but it was also really a challenge. And it was us all taking this leap of faith of let's go, let's move, let's try to do this. And so our weekend care has been open just for a couple of weeks now. We've already had 81 visits for more than 561 hours of care for those hospital staff who really need it. And we are seeing the direct impact that this makes on them, especially, I'm sure you have heard about the shortages of nurses and of other healthcare workers and how much extra time they're having to pick up. And we're able to help meet that need by providing childcare. So that's a lot about how we at Mommies in Need specifically have innovated. And before we end today, I just want to talk a little bit about, some of my tips for other companies that are looking to innovate. And I think, the first piece that we already talked about is I think you have to check in with all of your stakeholders. And so that is your clients or customers or donors, if you're a nonprofit. That is most importantly with your staff. And I think, there are a lot of companies that have an open door policy, but I think you have to make really clear that you mean it. And that means that you go into staff meetings and you ask questions and you welcome the answers, even if they're challenging, even if it's something that's pushing, a boundary that you have or something you've set up for the company. And somebody's telling you, I think that from what I've seen, this isn't the way to go. You have to keep that open mind. You have to listen. And then you have to encourage your employees to feel safe to speak up. So for example, something we did at one of our big in-services is something I like to call 3 ideas or big ideas. And the rule is every person gets about 5 minutes to brainstorm 3 ideas of what we could do to make the company better. But here's the catch. One of the ideas has to be dumb. We say it has to be dumb, it has to be bad, whatever you'd like. You can make 2 good ideas and 1 that's stupid. And there's a couple reasons for this. And the first is I want people to get used to saying something and being okay if it's not a great idea. Because look, brainstorming is one of my favorite activities, but 80% of brainstorming is bad ideas, but they lead you to something else, right? So you say, okay, so an example is somebody might come around and say, I think we should have put a parking lot on the roof of the building. And we're obviously not going to do that. But what did that tell me? Parking is an issue, right? Of somebody saying something that they mean is this outrageous idea, but actually kind of comes around to something else. And so that's just one example of how you can encourage innovation. And the other piece is, I think, you have to be willing to take some risks. Now, they have to be smart risks. They have to be risks that you research and make sure are okay. But sometimes you just have to take that leap. And you have to just build the thing as you're going and be willing to have that courage. And, the opposite of courage isn't, not having any fear. It's of being a little afraid or nervous and doing that thing anyway. And I think that's the piece is you listen, you welcome advice from everybody. You don't have to take everybody's advice, but you really, truly welcome it. And then when it's time, you make that jump. And I'm really grateful to each of you that have made that jump with me, with Mommies in Need, with those that have come on this podcast. And I just want to say as we close out, I really hope that you, in your life, in your business, feel the freedom and the joy that comes from innovation, that you support your people and you help create big, fearless ideas, and then you give them a chance to grow. So with that, I want to just say thank you so much again, and can't wait to talk to you next time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's got glitter.
Hi.
It's so cool.
Quiet.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It is so much fun to be here with you today. It is so fun. Hi there. You want to give me a high five? Yeah. One more hug.
Culture of Caring with Natalie Boyle is brought to you by Mommies in Need, a nonprofit organization with the mission of caring for kids so that families can access healthcare. The podcast is hosted by Natalie Boyle, produced by Tabitha Evans and Real News Communications Network. If you have an idea for a topic or guest, or want to share a #FailedSoHard moment, email us at coc@mommiesinneed.org. Please remember to rate, like, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Video versions of the podcast are available on YouTube.